create a feeding system that feeds either single ticket buyers or non-purchasers into a subscription process, because the leverage in the orchestra comes from subscribers who contribute. That's where all the leverage is. There's no leverage in my mind anywhere else. So in my mind, this relates to how does, once an orchestra becomes part of the fabric, what they do is create conditions to feed the system. And we need to feed more and more people into this system right now, because most orchestras have declining subscribers, number of subscriber households. And as a result, in order to turn that around, we need to have a very large number of people coming in. If you say that we have pretty much saturated the traditional group of attendees, we have no alternative but to become more diverse in terms of our contact.
It's wonderful that you're saying this, because I was going to ask you a question that's pretty inescapable, which is, you have been talking in terms of building up subscribers, building long-term relationships between people who are part of the audience of the orchestra and the orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you're aware that a large part of the orchestra world is, or appears to be, in the process of giving up on this. You really hear people saying, and I mentioned Jim Underkoffler from the Philadelphia Orchestra in the video interview I did with him yesterday here. He says, in effect, the subscription era is over, and we have to be selling single tickets. And then you have the very brave or the very foolish Pittsburgh Symphony, which still believes in the subscription model.
Yes.
And many people look at them and they raise their eyebrows. Now, I'll give you a very dramatic example. I can't name the orchestra, but I've seen some of their internal documents. It's a big orchestra, and they are projecting for future ticket sales fewer and fewer sales to their core, and more sales to single ticket buyers who have never been before.
So let's look at the economics of this. Because to me, at one level, this is all about the money. I'm sorry, it's not all about the music, because we won't have any music.
Because you won't have music unless you have the money.
We won't have music if we don't get the money.
Yeah.
And most orchestras in this country are struggling around the money. And we can say all we want about the condition of the industry, but the orchestras that I have had relationships with, they're all struggling around money. And they continue to struggle every year around money. The facts are, from what I understand, is that between 50 and 70% of annual fund contributors are subscribers to a classical series. There are almost no contributions that come from single ticket buyers. So, in order to follow the path that our future is in single tickets, then we're going to have to do something extraordinary. We're going to have to figure out how to get single ticket purchasers to make significant contributions. I think that's a much tougher problem to solve than increasing the number of subscribers. Personally, I think it's a much tougher problem to solve, because I don't have any commitment in those people. We know that from their behavior. So how do I get people who are basically uncommitted to contribute? I think
Probably
it's pretty
what
hard.
you need to do, if you're going to follow that model, is you have to develop new sources of money.
Absolutely.
So that you're not depending as much on donations from loyal subscribers. Now you're going to have to talk about more from corporations, from funding, from foundations, from government. But those sources are pretty well tapped out.
They're tapped out. So that leads to large endowments. And we know that there are some orchestras in this country that are chasing larger and larger endowments. And I believe that that's a necessary part of the formula. Except if we cannot build a greater level of commitment in the households we serve, in the communities we serve, I don't believe that any amount of endowment ultimately will solve the problem.
Okay, now let me ask you what I think is a heartbreaking devil's advocate question.
Okay.
And it's a thought that I've been developing as we've talked about something that would be wonderful to see. Then I realized that it played directly into your idea of developing a wider constituency and having them be loyal to the orchestra. And then I wondered if it would be enough. So here it is.
Okay.
One of the most inspiring ideas for widening the reach of classical music that I've run into came from a pianist in North Carolina named Greg McCallum. He wasn't able to follow through this because he had some health issues that got in the way of the project, but he was set to bring his grand piano to every county in North Carolina, play concerts, do master classes, and also arrange concerts for any pianist who wanted to play those counties. So I think, what if the New York Philharmonic did that in New York City? The New York Philharmonic goes to the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem once a year, and with all respect to them, if they think this discharges their duty to New York's wider communities, that's a joke. But supposing they really developed a base in each borough of the city and neighborhoods they didn't go to. Now, I happen to know that Lincoln Center some years ago did an audience study in New York that revealed something absolutely fabulous that nobody has acted on, which is that there is a large potential audience for the performing arts made up of people who don't read the New York Times and therefore don't know what's going on and don't go to Lincoln Center in part because they have no idea what's being offered. So let's suppose that this is really true and that the Philharmonic therefore finds a much warmer reception and much more loyal reception in the boroughs than anybody might have expected in advance. And now here's my heartbreaking question. As they begin to develop supporters, Staten Island, in immigrant communities in Queens, in the depths of Brooklyn, and in the Bronx, are these people going to be able to give as much money as the traditional subscribers do? The ones who live in the fabled 10021 zip code, you know, the people who traditionally have been the ruling elite of New York. Are these people from the boroughs going to be able to give enough money to right the balance and make a difference?
I would imagine that the answer is probably no. That the large donors to both annual fund and to endowments are essential, and they're going to remain essential. That doesn't mean, though, that it's not necessary to find ways to have as many subscribers and attendees contribute to the institution. Because as things are today, probably 98% of attendees are subsidized by somebody or some organization. And I think that when that recognition is important for people to understand in terms of really judging the value of what they get, and it's one of the reasons why I think enhanced value is so critical, because I believe that if people really understood what it really costs to put a concert on, they would even see it having less value. And so to me, there's a real paradox here that in order to get those people to contribute the $10, $1,500, $500, which do make a small impact on the overall funding, they have to also perceive that it's high value and that their money is not being wasted.
Here's how one way that you leverage this dream of going out into the neighborhoods of New York. You're asking people to support the institution. Well, what are they supporting? Oh, we give great concerts at Lincoln Center. We're internationally famous. We tour Europe and we get standing ovations. Okay, that's not a small thing. But how much better would it be if they said, and on top of that, we are beloved in the neighborhoods of New York City?
Well, this goes back to the point that we were talking about in terms of the orchestra being woven into the fabric of their community, because I think that we see enough evidence in terms of people's giving behavior in this country that when people value nonprofit institutions, even people with little money contribute to them. That's just part of our culture. So when